Well, guys, we'll pull the music down very low in the background just so you can hear these two gentlemen as we're speaking. Welcome, Mr. Paul King. I see. Welcome, Mr. Everyone to our program, and Mr. Paul King is just joining us in our studio. Congratulations. We have Mr. Frank Singh online also calling in. Mr. Rusat is to my right. Mr. Frank is on the phone, and Mr. Paul Singh is in Toronto. Did I say Paul Singh? Am I trying to make him Caribbean?
He spends so much time with our community. He's honorary Paul Singh.
That's cool.
He's Mr. Frank Singh, good night to you. We'll talk to you in 1 minute. Mr. Nawaz is on the line also. We have Mr. Paul. I'll pull up the flyer. Here we have Mr. Paul King. He is fighting for your American dream, guys. We need you guys to come in. What do you need from our people, Mr. Rusat? Mr. Rusat is joining us, and he is no stranger to our studio. He's been part of our community fighting for democracy. He's been fighting for our rights for a long time, and he's here because he saw Mr. King and he said, you know what, you're doing a wonderful job. You represent what we represent. So tell us a little bit more about.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Shanaz, for having myself and Mr. King here today. It's always an honor to be on your show and to be in this wonderful studio. And thank you to all your viewers and listeners for tuning in tonight. I mean, honestly, one of my favorite parts when I was running for City Council a while back was being on your show. So I miss being here, and I'm glad to be here tonight. So you asked, what does our community need? And I think every person in our community would say we need better representation.
Right.
We need better leaders in this city, because nobody's happy with the state of the city right now. Nobody's happy when they go on the subway and they have to, be afraid of going home at night because of the high subway crime and crime overall in the city. Nobody's happy when they go to the grocery store and they see the high inflation. They look at the price of eggs, or go to the gas station and see the price of gas. Nobody's happy in general with the way anything in the city is going. But the problem is, especially in our community, we complain about all the things going wrong, but we don't vote.
We are very good at complaining. It's
Exactly.
easy to do, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to do for us to make complaints. But I want to appeal to the citizens who I know, some folks are citizens and they don't go out to vote.
Exactly. I say, especially in our community, because you see so many people who, unfortunately are not citizens yet. It's so sad. Sometimes the people who are not citizens would love to vote, and the people who are citizens and can vote don't go out and exercise their right to vote. And it's even worse because if you think about it, what was the reason you came from Guyana in the first place? Because you didn't have representation, because you couldn't vote there at that time. And then you came here, you have the right to vote now, and then you don't use it. And it's so sad. It's such a shame in this community. The truth is, about depending on which year you look at, 80 to 90% of the people in this area just don't vote. Last year, 91% of the people living in the area just don't vote. And again, it's not enough to complain. You have to go out and vote. So what is up for election this year? We have obviously president. Everybody's looking at the president. But the president is not what's going to have to do with, your local issues. But who's going to represent you in DC with regards to your local area? That's your congressman, your member of Congress. And the people running for Congress in this area this year, there are two gentlemen. Gregory Meeks, who's been there for 26 years.
26 years, that's a long time.
If you're not happy with the way things have gone over the past 26 years, you probably shouldn't vote for the guy who's been there for 26 years, because you're only going to get more of the same from him.
Right.
And the other gentleman who's running for Congress to represent us is sitting right here with us today. He's a great gentleman, Mr. Paul King. And I always joke when I introduce him, because our Guyanese community, we like to see people who look the part, clean cut. All the people looking at him today. Doesn't he look the part?
He looked the part. In fact, my friends are saying you have two good-looking fellows on screen. So thank you guys. Yes, two good-looking dudes, and not just good-looking. He's been doing the work. And who's our representation right now? Have you seen them?
Exactly. The sad thing is, if you go around the area and you ask 10 people, who is your congressman? Who is your state senator? Who is your state assembly person? Who is your city council person? I bet you all 10 people would not be able to answer those questions, because you don't see the people who so-called representing us, because they don't represent us. They don't have respect for us. They don't come here. They don't reach out to the local area. You're going to listen to Mr. King tonight. You may like what he has to say. You may not like what he has to say. But at the end of the day, he had enough respect for you. He had enough respect for this community to come out and reach out to us. The other person does not have that respect for us. And I think that that's something our community has to take into account.
Thank you very much, Rusat. Let's say welcome Mr. Paul to our program. And tell us a little bit about you, because I know you went to DC recently, and you said you enjoy, going up there. So tell us a little bit more what you stand for. As I've known him for a long time. I've seen him doing the work in our community. And I'll read Razia's comment. She said they complain to everyone except the right source to get results. I mean, simple fact that my studio is on Rockaway and Van Wyck, and if you walk around this area, it's filthy, it's unsafe. BB Khan, good night to you. And she said, I think you're in trouble. Yes, a lot of folks, they want everything, they complain, but they don't do anything about it. And the first thing you have to do is go out and vote. I believe that's our First Amendment right?
It's your right as a citizen. And your First Amendment right is, the free speech, freedom of religion, and those rights, quite frankly, are under attack in other ways as well right now. But the fact is that it's your duty and your right as a citizen to vote, and it's so sad in our community that so many people don't vote. Some people say that it's the Democrat area, some people say it's the Republican area. The truth is, to use a Guyanese term, it's a don't care damn area, because the vast majority of people don't care enough to go out and vote.
Right. So if you want to make a difference, you have to get out there and vote. Let's hear a little bit about Mr. Paul King, what he has to say. Okay. Thank you for joining us in our studio tonight. It's always nice hearing from you. Last night he spoke at the Rotary Club, and I said, wow, you do sound good. You sound like the candidate we need to represent us. And we see him time and time again. We run into him in our community. So yes, I could call him Mr. Singh sometimes.
Well, I do need to start by thanking you. It's a privilege to be here. Since my earliest days of being involved in the community, certainly got to know you, but also people speak of you, not just your broadcast, but your mission. So it's like sitting down with a local legend. So I'm honored to be here tonight and honored to have the opportunity to speak with your audience. And just for people who haven't seen me wandering around, my name's Paul King. I'm a business owner and a civic leader in Rockaway. I'm also a homeowner and a family man. I've got children and grandchildren, and I did run for Congress 2 years ago, but I'm not at 60 years old looking for a new career. I'm looking to fix what's broken in America for our children and grandchildren, because things have been going the wrong way for a while, and I wouldn't be able to rest easy. I'm actually a professional problem solver as a consultant. I fix systemic problems. I think I know what to do, working with people in the community so we get things right. And if I don't give it a shot to turn it around for our children and our grandchildren, I would never be able to rest. So I'm thrilled to be here and working with people in the community like yourself and Rusat.
Thank you. I'll read Razia's comment. It's sad to say that she's living here 30, 40 years, but she's seen people not voting for 30, 40 years. She offered to take them out. Our comments are moving very fast. She offered to take them out to the voting poll. So guess what? We will take you up on that offer this time around. So if you know someone wants to go out to the voting poll again, just offer your help. Compton, Danite, good night to you. Watching us from Brompton. Buddy Boy, good night, good night. Jennifer Prasad.
I'll say something. That's an entertainment show, so we have to
keep our audience.
We have to balance with some entertainment as well. So, when I ran for city council, you guys saw me a lot. I was doing a lot of work, and I think
you work really hard, Rusat. You work really hard. You target all the religious institutions, all the schools, our communities. You did. I don't know. There's nothing else you could have done.
So I think it's fair to say at least in the modern time, the recent time, I probably did the most local campaigning of anybody running for city council in this area, right? Unfortunately, at the end of the day, not enough people in our area voted, and yeah, I didn't end up winning that election. I lost that election, but the point is that people don't vote. And after I lost the election, I always know, people don't vote in this area. I decided to look more into the history of how long people have not been voting. In 1996, so 28 years ago we're talking about, there was a New York Times article about how the Guyanese community, which had 100,000 in total at the time living in South Rosen Park, Richmond Hill, was not voting. And the New York Times had a full-on article about how the Guyanese community was complaining that they didn't have representation, but that they still were not voting. And this would mean that 100,000 people back then, it still wasn't new. So again, what Razia said just now is so true. This has been going on literally for decades, and we have to stop it at some point. Guyanese would get the reference that if that article is 28 years ago, in Guyana, we know after 28 years, sometimes things can change. So hopefully we can change that at some point in this community. And on the issue of, you offer the people will help you go vote, and they still don't want to vote. I'll tell you the story. On election time, we were offering people, you want a right to go vote, we'll find you a right to go vote. There was a lady who literally lived less than a block away from the polling site, and she said if she does not get a ride to go vote, less than 1 block away, she was not going to vote.
It's like you have a food pantry. You're telling them you're giving away stuff, but you have to give it to them. Sometimes they don't make an effort to come out there. So, what question would you have for our candidate today, Mr. Paul King?
So again, the focus is on Mr. King tonight because this is the election coming up this year, and this is a very important election. So. First off, Mr. King, could you explain to the listeners tonight what area your district covers? So that way they know whether they live in your district or not and can vote for you or not. And even if they don't live in the district, they may have family who does live in the district and they can remind them to get out and vote for you.
Well, for an urban district, it's very large because Jamaica Bay is in the middle of my district, JFK is in the middle of my district. So I have the entire Rockaway Peninsula, which is where I live, and then it goes from Far Rockaway all the way up the Nassau border to Queens Village, across to Jamaica Estates, Forest Park, then down Woodhaven, and all the way back to Rockaway. And so it's roughly a big rectangle, but right in the heart of that is Little Guyana, running, along Liberty Avenue. Like, in fact, the most swing voters in the entire district, the people who could decide the election one way or the other if they turn out, are between Atlantic Avenue and 109th Avenue, between 105th Street and the Van Wyck Expressway. That is the kind of the core audience for me of voters, people who can help us change the future or let things keep going the same way. But that's my district in a nutshell. It represents 750,000 people.
Question for you. I'm sure you're running because you see the change. We need the change. What's a few things? Give us and this is for all our viewers locked in. There's campaign, there is a political party. Don't think of a political party. You think about the right candidate who will do better for your community. This is your America. We need to get it back. Don't you think so, Rusat?
Exactly. And again, don't just look at the party, look at the person. And I want you to also look at his name. Paul King, right? Easier to remember the name King. You're not voting for King, you're voting for Congress. But a phrase I'll use here, Mr. King just described the importance of our community to this election, right? He talked about the district. So the district covers most of South Queens. It's fair to say in a general way. And right in the heart of the district is the Little Guyana area, the West Indian community at large, Guyanese, Trinidadian, the Indian community too. We are not the kings in this community, or no, we are the kings of the community, but we're not the kings of Queens, but we can be the king makers in Queens. We can be the ones who swing an election one way or the other. We can decide who wins and who loses, right? In this race between Mr. King and Mr. Meeks, if we swing from Meeks to King, King will go to Congress. So that is, the pivotal point in this election. We are the swing voters, and our community needs to realize the power we have in our vote. There's going to be so many people, I'm sure Mr. King hears this so often campaigning, who say, "Oh, my vote doesn't matter. I'm not going to waste my time and go out and vote." Actually, your vote does matter very much, and especially when it comes to those local elections, like who's going to represent you in Congress.
Well, Rusat, our community, I feel like they don't give us the support. When you were running, I thought, okay, maybe Rusat didn't win because he's a brown guy like us. But, in other community, they support each other. If you see a brown guy going up there, you will do all you can, especially from the Caribbean, from Guyana, from Trinidad. You want to support. You want to say, I support him. Except our mentality is still crab in a barrel syndrome, where people see you look like them and they think, okay, I don't want that guy to get better than who I am. All right? Do you think so?
Sadly, it is true, and there's a lot of that. But, I try not to focus on the negative too much, and, you want to focus on the positive.
We got to break down the negative because it's still embedded in them. They have to support each other, and you have to support, okay, you know what Mr. King stands for. Mr. King, tell them a little bit more about your vision and what you have plans for us.
Sure. Three big things. The first one is really it's a package of ideas. I'm all about the American dream. My grandfather was an immigrant from Italy, came here at 10 years old. He didn't get anything for free. He worked really hard, but eventually owned his own home, owned his own business, brought his family over, made it possible for his children to have a better life. And the building blocks, as I call them, are broken in America. And it's like the government's fighting against hardworking communities, like the Guyanese people, undermining hard work, undermining education. So I want to fix education, access to jobs, and access to capital for when you want to own a home or a business. So that kind of package is number one. If you're doing it right here, you should be able to succeed just based on your hard work. That's the American way. So I want to fix that as number one. Number two is inflation. Well, it's not even inflation. It's really the cost of living at this point. We've already suffered the inflation from bad policies, and Gregory Meeks just wants to keep spending money, which devalues our money. It means our prices go up. It means our children have a ton of debt. I know how to fix that. So the prices will start coming down, and it's better for everyone who's trying to live their American dream, anyone who's living paycheck to paycheck. And it's also good for small business, because when our customers can't afford to buy things, then they buy less. So we need to fix inflation. It's corrosive. I know how to do that. And I'd say the third big thing to focus on is crime. It's not even that our crime rates are so high, that somehow we've gotten to the sense of lawlessness that I haven't seen since the 1970s when I was a boy. People just feel like they can get away with anything. They can come into your store and rob things. And from a federal level, we can help finance bringing police back. We used to have closer to 40,000 police. Now we have less than 30,000. We need the protection there so we can live our American dream, so we can have confidence when our kids go to school they'll be safe. That we'll be safe in our stores and safe when we're shopping. That gives us the freedom to be who we are. So those are three big things that I think will help our community right here, the Guyanese American community.
Mr. King, I want to touch on something you said just now. You talked about inflation being a result of how the government has spent money, right? They've spent it recklessly, and that's why we deal with the inflation issue we have right now. Now, one of the most important jobs that a member of Congress has, right? Because if you win, you're going to represent us in Congress,
right,
is deciding how money is spent. Now, if we look at how Mr. Meeks has decided how money is spent during his time there, and I encourage people, go out and, don't just hear me for it, do your own research as well. In his time in Congress, Mr. Meeks has decided that, billions and billions of dollars should go abroad. He's decided even within the money spent in his district, it should only go to certain parts of his district, in Jamaica and other areas, but not really in Richmond Hill Ozone Park. And I just think that's such a big thing for people to pay attention to, because, a lot of people, they hear this one's running for this, that one's running for that, and they don't really think about, what are they supposed to be doing? But with Congress, one of the things you're supposed to be doing is deciding how money is spent. And I think you've said repeatedly on the campaign trail, I've heard you say it, I think you'll say it again here tonight, you will actually represent our community by deciding to spend money within our community, in Richmond Hill, in South Ozone Park, in ways that Mr. Meeks never has. For 26 years he's been there. And I just want people to think about how long 26 years is. I mean, Mr. Meeks has been there since before I was born. I mean, just think about it, 26 years. If you can't do a job over 26 years, what makes you think you're going to start doing the job now?
Yeah, they say Congress has the power of the purse, and I look at that at two levels. One is sort of the policy decisions that Rusat was talking about. Meeks likes to just go along with the party. He rubber stamps, does whatever Biden says 100% of the time. So if Biden wants to spend money on foreign wars, that's where our tax money goes. If they want to kind of pay off special interests that help them get elected, that's where our money goes. It's really our grandchildren's money because they're borrowing it. So that's painful, but then there's the local spending, because every congressman brings back money to the district. It's our money, but they spend it here. And recently, just last week, I saw something that Anthony D'Esposito put out, the congressman right across the border in Nassau, and it was a map of where the money went in his district. And it was very evenly distributed. And they were all good causes, and not even thinking about the causes, just how it was distributed. You could see he was taking care of everyone equally. If you were to do the same map here in our district, I guarantee you.
I was about to ask, where is our map? Can we see where the money has been allocated to?
Yeah. Meeks doesn't want us to see that map because it's on the other side of the Van Wyck. It's not in Rockaway. It's not here. It's on the other side of the Van Wyck, even more so on the other side of Merrick Boulevard, where his power base is. He takes care of his own. He wants your votes, and I hate to say anything divisive, and I think Rusat would attest to this. I'm always about finding the common ground and working together and unity. But for me, and I'm white, but when I hear politicians on the Democratic side pounding the message away of black and brown, I always feel like they're taking care of the black, but they really don't mean the brown. They want your vote because that to help keep their power. But when push comes to shove, when they make policy decisions, when they distribute our taxpayer money, it leans a certain way. And they don't take care of the people who are South Asian. They don't take care of the people who are Hispanic as well. So, and again, I don't like to be divisive, because we should all be in this together. But I think that unfairness needs to be called out, and it's kind of obvious.
Well, I'm not going to say it from you, nor me, but Raja said Meeks is a crook. John from Queens, our #1 West Indian YouTuber, says all politicians in power right now are corrupt. Hey, Ramdat Sukui, he's watching us from Homeland, Guyana. Good night to you. The beautiful Razia said, I'll read your comment. And that's piggybacking off of the police and, defunding the police. You should fight for them because to reverse bail reform. Fight for bail reform because the criminals are not spending any time in jail. So the crime will never stop, because right now they know if they get in petty larceny, they could go, less than $1,000. They probably don't spend no time. They're out on the street again. Your safety, your children's safety are at risk.
Exactly. I agree with the comments that were just said, the Facebook. And two things I want to touch on from what Mr. King said just now. I want people to focus on it. So we're talking about the way the funding goes. It's tied exactly to what we were saying earlier about whether people vote or not. So one of the reasons that Mr. Meeks will, put funding in, the Jamaica area, South Jamaica, is because the people who live there vote. So if they vote, he's going to reward them. He's going to give them funding so that they can go and vote for him again. The people here don't vote. And they never vote. As was said, for decades they don't vote. So if you don't vote, he'll take you for granted. I don't need to spend the money there. Those people don't vote anyway. So it's time to stop being taken for granted. Get out and vote, and you will have the final laugh. Because you'll say to Mr. Meeks, you didn't give us funding, and eventually we voted you out. You didn't do the job, we fired you. Because at the end of the day, we are the bosses of the politicians, right? We hire them, we fire them. They work for us. We don't work for them. And Mr. King said also about Long Island, Esposito, the way that the funding is done there. And there's so many people in the Guyanese community who are moving out to Long Island. And all of them say, oh, I moved to Long Island. Things are so nice in Long Island. Everything's so... I want them to think, why is it night and day between the way Long Island is and the way Queens is right now? And then I want you to look at who are the elected officials in Long Island and who are the elected officials in Queens. It's not that far away. It's only a few miles away. But in Long Island, they vote for sensible, reasonable Republicans. Bruce Blakeman is the county executive in Long Island, and they're doing a fine job. And I know the Guyanese people enjoy the job Blakeman is doing because they enjoy the way Nassau County is going right now. They're moving there in droves. Like I said the number earlier, the New York Times in 1996 at 100,000 Guyanese in Queens. I would actually love for them to do a detailed report on how many Guyanese live in Queens now and how many live in Long Island now. Because I think sooner than later, more are leaving in Long Island than here.
But hopefully they don't take the same mentality, the same concept, and the dirtiness into Long Island. That's the only thing I'm afraid of. Kamal Hamid, good night to you, watching us from Toronto. Videsh, good night to you. And John from Queens says, I didn't listen to the debate, but I listened to the critique about the debate, and a lot of folks said, well, we got some good talkers, and not everybody's a good talker, right? We have doers. A lot of people can say, okay, you speak well, you answer all your questions correct, but how much are you willing to do for us? Right?
Yeah.
So we know who does the work. People has been in power for a long time. You haven't seen the work done. Why are you willing to give them another chance? So give someone else another chance who could do something. I remember reading a quote, you cannot have change by doing the same thing over and over. We expect change by doing the same thing over and over. You have to do something different to expect a different result. John said, how could this have happened? That the people in power have allowed an open border. Oh my God, that's opening a barrel of worms right now, but it's a great topic. Open border against federal law, allowing rapists and crime, causing the worst inflation in United States has ever seen. Democrats in power are allowing it. So that's another topic, and we want to talk about. I don't want to forget the topic on the ballot. Let's remind everyone when is election so they can mark their calendars, because that is the first thing, everybody's working. I leave work or I go to vote before I go to work. So when is election again?
Well, the actual election day is Tuesday, November 5th, but early voting starts October 25th, so about 10 days earlier. And I'm a traditionalist. Even I always like to be there on election day with all the other citizens. But last year my father-in-law had a medical emergency, so my wife didn't get to vote. And I just happened to be, I voted early. It wasn't my plan. I was walking past one of these early voting stations and it was empty. I'm like, well, I'm going in. It took me 2 minutes.
Voting is the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
The easiest, one of the easiest thing. Rampant crime, that's right. Let's talk about the crime and the inflation while we talk about the crime.
I just say one thing quickly. Something that I hear so often in the Guyanese community, and for our audience, is sadly there's some people, they want to vote, and for whatever reason they don't know where they have to vote. Now, you look out. You're supposed to get a card in the mail every year from Board of Elections telling you where your voting site is. But in general speaking, more often than not, it's the local school, whatever public school is closest by you. Normally is your voting site. So just take that in mind. And also the early voting, I know in this area, is at Resorts World Casino. So as Mr. King was saying, early voting will begin in late October, a few days before the actual election. So if you don't know how things are going to go for you on the Tuesday, get it out of the way the week beforehand. Get it out. It's even open on the weekends. Go Saturday and Sunday. And importantly, because again, our community barely ever votes, so we actually have to get out and vote. Don't vote alone. Take your family with you. Make it a family activity.
Great idea.
That's right. When my son turned 18, I said, "Child, did you register to vote? Look it up, get on it right now." I think he said, "Mom, I registered to vote and also to be an organ donor." So, you have to tell them, know what you expect from them and lead them the right way. If you don't vote, maybe your children wouldn't vote.
Yeah, and take your neighbors too. If your neighbors always complain to you, "Oh my God, there's so much crime," say, "Well, don't complain to me if you don't vote."
So maybe Razia, soon or later in Long Island, they would not allow the loud music, and I'm sure it's not allowed over there.
It's not allowed.
Yeah, it's a little bit over there, but it's not as much as Queens. So if you want these things to stop or make a difference, you have to go out. You have to know your candidate, what they stand for. And I'll give Mr. Paul King the time to tell you more about him and what he stands for when it comes to crime in our community.
Yeah, crime diminishes everyone's life, and you can't eliminate crime. But we've seen in this country, in this city, when we went from having more than 2,000 murders, which was horrific, to getting it down to a few hundred. From places in the city you would never walk at night to having one of the safest cities in the country, now it's going in the other direction. And it is certainly happening because of decisions made in Albany and in City Hall, where they're just not letting the cops enforce the law. And that's why, Rusat was talking about local politicians. It's not just Congress. There's things I can do from Congress, but we also need to change our state senator, our assembly person. If they're not standing for law and order, for your family's safety, vote them out. They're on the ballot this November as well. But what I can do from Washington, as I mentioned before, we need more police. We can fund that. And I think that's an important use of the actual tools. But one of the things that I think is really important, if you're a congressman, like Teddy Roosevelt said, as a president, he had the bully pulpit. If you're a congressman, you've got the title and the authority that comes with that, and the credibility. And when there are problems in the neighborhood, even though your job's in Washington, when you're back here, you need to be in the neighborhood. And sometimes that means yelling. I'm a even-keeled sort of person, but I would be out in front of a place where we had persistent crime, where there were robberies in a shopping mall, calling attention to the press, embarrassing the mayor, saying this is a problem that needs to get looked at. We're not just going to say, oh, well, or accept this is the way of life around here. You need to be able to use your voice to fight for those changes, even if you can't legislate them from D.C. And heck, on the noise, which I know is this particular area of Queens has more noise complaints than any place on the planet. If we need to get some, what the sound meters are called, they measure the decibels. Heck, that's an easy thing to fund from Congress. Put 5 or 10 of them around.